Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming today to talk today about Minnesota's PFAS and food packaging ban. I'm Kirk Koudelka, I'm Assistant Commissioner, as mentioned, here at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And I'll have my colleague join me in a little bit here, Al Innes, with our Toxics and Products program. So I'm just going to start off here today with a little bit of background and turn it over to Al, who will do most of the specifics regarding the actual law. So just want to remind folks how we in Minnesota have come about to do all this work, and that is about the Minnesota's PFAS blueprint. And this is a culmination of work almost 3 years old of Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, Minnesota Department of Health, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, Agriculture, and others, as we put together a comprehensive, systematic approach of how we were going to address PFAS in Minnesota. While we've been dealing with PFAS here in Minnesota for decades, since it first was found in production wells of an industry in 2002, this document really sets out how are we going to move forward into the coming decades with PFAS. And it has it in various categories of where we're going to look at it everywhere from measurement, what are the health-based values, and then really how do we handle PFAS? You'll often hear the MPCA say there are 3 ways to handle contamination and pollution. We can prevent it, we can manage it, and we can clean it up. The further we get on that spectrum that I just talked about in the cleanup piece, the most higher impacts have already been felt by residents of Minnesota, but also the costs go up. And that's why one of the main pieces of this blueprint that I want to highlight today is that we are really looking at how do we work on PFAS pollution prevention, because it is the least costly and helps remove all those negative impacts that we're seeing as we get further into the management and cleanup avenue. Just to highlight that, I want to note a report that was published earlier this year by MPCA using the lottery proceeds and LCCMR, where we looked at what are the costs to remove and destroy PFAS from wastewater and landfills. And this groundbreaking report noted that the cleanup and remove PFAS from those areas could cost between $14 billion and $28 billion over the next 20 years. Just to put this in comparison, it costs a person to buy a pound of PFAS anywhere from $50 to $1,000 per pound. But to clean it up from our wastewater plants, it could be anywhere from $2.7 to $18 million per pound, and our landfills anywhere from $12 million to $400,000 per pound. Clearly, we have already talked in other areas about the health benefits of preventing PFAS. There's also the economic argument. And so that's why Minnesota and Minnesota's legislature has really moved forward in providing a number of prohibitions on the use of PFAS to really look at addressing PFAS from its source and source reduction. It is clear we cannot clean our way out of this issue. So the next slide really just puts in context today's discussion, which is about PFAS in food packaging and the law. But as I mentioned, Minnesota has a history of this for PFAS and other chemicals where we've put in these prohibitions. In Minnesota, we already had a PFAS ban for firefighting foam and for its use for testing and training. And then a couple of years ago, the PFAS food packaging ban that was implemented, that was passed and will be implemented here on January 1st. And even since then, more has been done, including a package of PFAS bans and reporting requirements known as Amara's Law altogether that go into effect in the future. I just want to be clear to avoid any type of confusion. Today's conversation is just about PFAS and food packaging that kicks in on January 1st, but just want to show that this is a larger effort that the Minnesota legislature and state agencies have been working on to really focus on PFAS pollution prevention and source reduction. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Al, who will talk more specifically about this law.
Thank you, Kirk. And hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Al Innes. I am the Safer Product Chemistry Coordinator for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And next, I will briefly cover more detail about the PFAS and food packaging law, aspects of early implementation, some of the questions received so far, and then leave time to take some of your questions. So to start with the intent of the PFAS and food packaging law, first, protect human health and the environment from PFAS throughout the PFAS life cycle, not only by reducing PFAS in packaging directly contacting food, but by reducing PFAS in the solid waste system, in other words, landfills, waste to energy facilities, recycling, composting. All of these solid waste management methods disperse PFAS into our environment, and recycling and composting can cycle low levels of durable PFAS forward into the environment or into food and new products. To cover some key definitions, food being one of those very key ones. Food is defined as any food or beverage. This is very broad coverage. Food includes gum, candy, dietary supplements. Smoothies could be either food or beverage, depending on who is doing the classifying, and so on and so on. But our working interpretation is that the packaging for anything sold for oral consumption, excluding medicines, is covered. Another definition that's key is food package. And it is defined as, for multiple purposes, again, not just direct food or beverage contact and containment, but a means a container applied or providing a means to market, protect, handle, deliver, serve, contain, or store food or beverage. It also includes unsealed receptacles, often associated with takeout food services, such as carrying cases, crates, cups, plates, bowls, pails, rigid foil and other trays, wrappers and wrapping films, bags and tubs. And since this is a list preceded by such as, that means included are other unsealed receptacles which may not be specifically on this list. In addition, the food package definition includes any and all layers of packaging, from next adjacent to the food or beverage, a unit package, any and all intermediate packaging, and any and all shipping containers. And the definition of food package includes other parts or components used to carry out the multiple purposes above on the slide, marketing, protecting, handling, etc., such as interior or exterior blocking, bracing, cushioning, weatherproofing, exterior strapping, coatings, closures, inks, and labels. And again, this is a list preceded by the word such as, so it includes others which may not be specifically listed, like shrink wrap, dyes, pigments, adhesives, stabilizers, and more. And I want to note here, to avoid confusion, which we have heard expressed, the packaging covered by this 2021 PFAS and food packaging law is specifically exempted in the broader PFAS and products law, referred to as Amara's law, passed in 2023. So none of the provisions in the 2023 law apply to the food packaging and components I just described. Another key definition, of course, is PFAS, which is defined in the law as a class of fluorinated organic chemicals containing at least one fully fluorinated carbon atom. The one fully fluorinated carbon atom definition is used in other states and across Minnesota PFAS restriction statutes, this food packaging law, another one on firefighting foam, and Amara's law, the broad Amara's law that passed this year. If you're wondering what fully fluorinated means, we're planning to follow the lead of the U.S. Geological Survey and some other state agencies and interpret it to mean a carbon atom on which all the hydrogen substituents have been replaced by fluorine, which begs the question, what are substituents? They are atoms or functional groups that replace atoms or groups in a molecule. So this is a very broad definition of PFAS, and it encompasses all subclasses of PFAS, including fluoropolymers, such as PTEFE. I would also note that this definition is broader, encompassing more chemicals than the U.S. Environmental Protection Agencies or the European Union's. The breadth of the PFAS definition is due to what we've come to understand are the full life cycle, cradle to grave, manufacture to disposal impacts of PFAS. Another key definition, that of intentionally added, which has several components to it. Intentionally added includes a PFAS deliberately added during the manufacturing of the food package or component, where the continued presence of the PFAS is desired in the final food package or packaging component, in which its presence is desired to perform a specific function. So this kind of layers these components together. This multi-factor definition emerged in legislative negotiation in 2021, in part to exclude PFAS processing aids used in manufacturing, which do not also serve a specific function in a final package or component. An example would be fluoropolymers added to plastic resins to aid in their formation during manufacturing into uniform food packaging films. And this is regardless of whether this use results in detectable levels of PFAS or fluorine in the final package. More key definitions as far as a prohibition on PFAS in food packaging itself. It applies to any person being a very broad term covering any individual or entity engaging in the prohibited actions, which are on the slide: manufacture or knowingly sell, offer for sale, distribute for sale, distribute or offer for use in Minnesota a food package that contains intentionally added PFAS. This could include any of these actions conducted at a Minnesota location, even if the consumer or purchaser is located outside the state. Oops, sorry. So by January 1st, 2024, you should remove food or beverage packaging and all components from sale in Minnesota if intentionally added PFAS are known to be present. And we would note that the law provides no further sell-through period for food packaging containing intentionally added PFAS, which is already in the supply chain or for sale. The law was enacted in 2021 with the effective date of January 1st, 2024. So that 2.5-year lag time was intended as the sell-through period. Also by January 1st, if PFAS information has not yet been received from suppliers, we would recommend that responsible persons gather it as quickly as possible and document its arrival and act on it appropriately. In other words, immediately remove from sale any food packaging which suppliers tell you contains intentionally added PFAS. If some suppliers do not cooperate with information in a timely way, consider changing performance or formulation requirements or even suppliers on as short a timeline as possible. Consider suspending or reversing distribution if there is too much uncertainty or delay in getting information from suppliers. We recognize that this kind of work with upstream suppliers may be complex and time-consuming, You are welcome to engage with us about difficult situations. More on compliance and enforcement. Make every effort to come into and document compliance as soon as possible. Ultimately, persons taking prohibited actions are responsible for their compliance status as of January 1st, 2024. And again, those prohibited actions: manufacture, knowingly sell, offer for sale, distribute for sale, distribute or offer for use in Minnesota. How will this be enforced? The MPCA may act on complaints or other information received, or on our own test results of food packaging that the agency obtains after January 1st. The MPCA may pursue inquiries to determine whether intentional additions of PFAS have taken place. And again, when requested, information on PFAS that is in hand or reasonably obtainable must be furnished to the MPCA. The public can submit complaints or other information via the Ask MPCA online form at the URL provided on the slide. And here's some information on PFAS or fluorine screening and testing in food packaging. There's much more technical detail, which I won't cover right now. However, we are glad to discuss our experiences and to hear about others' experiences as well. This is a new and rapidly developing area of analysis. First, we'll note that there is no defined threshold concentration for PFAS or fluorine in the food packaging law. This has been a frequently asked question. Elsewhere, there are limits of 100 parts per million in Florida law, applying to total organic fluorine, in the BPI compostability standard, applying to total fluorine, which meaning organic and inorganic. Some companies and labs use 50 to 100 parts per million fluorine as a quote unquote action level to start looking for sources of intentionally added PFAS. However, since there is no threshold concentration or limit on PFAS or fluorine in the food packaging law, the MPCA may engage with persons based on a result at any level from its screening or testing of food packaging. Lastly, a couple more frequently asked questions. Are food and beverage cans and bottles covered? The answer is yes. If a manufacturer is aware there are traces of PFAS in virgin or recycled feedstocks, are these traces intentionally added? No, they are not desired in the final product to serve a specific function, and therefore would not meet the intentionally added criteria. However, we would encourage manufacturers using virgin or recycled feedstock they know contains low-level residual PFAS to engage suppliers about ways to reduce that PFAS content, even though it is not intentionally added. One of the goals of the law is for such incidental presence of PFAS in feedstocks to gradually decline as non-PFAS virgin materials and components come into the material life cycle. And we also wanted to let you know that there is a brand new MPCA webpage on the PFAS prohibitions that Kirk touched on, including the prohibitions in food packaging, which can be found at this URL. This page or a linked subpage will be updated with more answers to frequently asked questions and other details as they become available. Thanks for listening to this walkthrough of the new law, its early implementation, and some questions raised to date. And now we'll turn it over to Hannah to moderate any questions you would like to raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. We have received a couple of questions via direct message, one on the main chat. Again, if you would like to ask a question, feel free to send it in the chat box. And we will get started from there. So the first question, we distribute products manufactured outside of the state of Minnesota. Our competitors distribute the same products. If we cannot verify that a product that we don't manufacture and have no control over is PFAS-free packaging, what should we do? If we stop distributing that product, but our competitors do not, what should we do? I ask because I think as a distributor of products, we cannot police packaging of products manufactured by others that are sold in interstate commerce. We don't have enough power to enforce Minnesota rules against national product manufacturers.
I can try to answer this one. This is Kit Grayson. Hold on.
Awesome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kit Grayson. I'm the Hazardous Waste Compliance and Enforcement Supervisor here at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And what I want you guys to remember is that, we have to do the best we can with the information that we have. And if we know that there's a package that contains PFAS and the ban is in place, we as an agency need to move forward with that information and try to do enforcement the best we can. Obviously, interstate commerce is difficult for us as we have jurisdiction over Minnesota, but we can and will step outside of the state if possible to enforce upon that. You as an individual, or not as an individual, but as a company, need to make sure that your products and your packaging is PFAS free.
Thank you, Kit. The next question, also sent directly. So these were a few questions that were sent ahead of time. Number one, is there an opportunity to apply for exemptions from the food packaging ban? And then as a follow-up, is there a private right of action for citizens to sue for damages under this packaging law as a result of offending packaging? So either Kirk or Al, there you go.
Thanks, Anna. I will take that second question. The specific law that's talked about in terms of the PFAS in food packaging does not include information about a right of action for citizens for damages. I'm not an attorney, and I do not know if in general Minnesota law does. That would be something I would recommend folks talk to their legal counsel if they have that question, but there's nothing specific in this law about it.
Great, thanks, Kirk.
What was the first part of the question? Sorry.
Yep, so the first part is there an opportunity to apply for exemptions from the food packaging ban?
No, that authority for us to grant exemptions was not provided in the law, or was rulemaking or any other more discretionary MPCA discretionary action. So no.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. Is the Minnesota definition for PFAS drawn from the OECD definition?
Well, my understanding is no. It is broader than the OECD definition, and again, to my understanding. It may have some similarities, but that's about all I can say on that. Don't know if others know anything about that.
We can certainly come back to that or follow up too if others do want to chime in on that one. As far as the next question that we got in, will MPCA work with health inspectors and other licensing staff at the local level and other state agencies to get information out to food retailers and to inspect their materials.
Go ahead, Al. I think you were going to talk about what we envision, and I know you had a slide on terms of how we are looking to ensure compliance with the law.
Yes, and we are authorized to collaborate with departments of health and commerce as part of the law. So we could be working with health to do monitoring, to collect information, to procure products for our own testing and take in complaints or things like that. But don't know that we have figured out whether we're going to be inspecting on site together with them or anything like that yet. So that's to be determined, I believe. I don't know if Kit has anything to add. But
from the compliance side of things, you know, we would partner with any agency that would help us ensure compliance with the law, with the rule.
Awesome. Great. And so the next question, do you provide a list of PFAS alternatives? If not, do you plan to create a list?
we do not have a list of alternatives. We hope to learn about what those are and and get enough information to understand that they are in fact safer alternatives that do not have unintended consequences near or long term. So we're always looking for more information both about PFAS in play right now and then the alternatives that might be brought in to replace them. So, but at this point, we don't have such a list.
Thanks, Al. Next question. Has my chat just moved. Has MPCA defined an official testing methodology to analyze PFAS? If so, what would it be?
I think that one is mine. We are learning as the rest of commerce is learning about what screening and testing methods are going to be most effective and accurate in indicating the presence of PFAS. We obviously want to know for compliance reasons, but you know, on the regulated party side, they certainly want to know if they're being informed of the presence of PFAS and they want certainty. So we have a shared interest in developing these methods and deploying them. And we certainly would like to discuss what you are exploring and how that syncs up with what we've been doing. We have so far tried a few things. We've tried total fluorine, then a second step of analyzing for extractable organic fluorine, and then backing that out to try to get to total organic fluorine. And that was not too successful. The total fluorine would show the potential presence of PFAS, fluorine at levels over 1,000 parts per million or more. And these were purchased obviously before the deadline, so PFAS were still being used. So not unexpected to find the fluorine there. But the extractable organic fluorine process is only as good as its extraction, which, as we know, does not work very well on polymeric PFAS or some other types of PFAS. So if those are being used in food packaging, then that technique is not going to work. So we took the same packaging and went to other labs and did the total fluorine and then minus total inorganic fluorine to calculate total organic fluorine. And we just received some results which showed that showed similar total levels of total organic fluorine as the total fluorine that was the result of step one. So, you know, that in a nutshell is where we are. We've tried as well some targeted PFAS analysis and total oxidizable precursor assay work as well. And those are, again, dependent on extraction methods, which are going to miss some types of PFAS. So I think that we're going to be homing in on this total fluorine minus total inorganic fluorine. But again, it's fluorine. It can only be a screen that provides an indicator of the possible presence of PFAS, and then we would have to figure out what to do next, how to get more information either analytically or working with to engage the company. So you know, we don't have the magic bullets yet, so certainly would love to learn from anybody who's willing to discuss it.
Great. Thank you, Al. Okay, next question. What if you have a situation where a product is entirely PFAS NI, except for a small component of the packaging that does not come into contact with the food? No manufacturer of that small component produces a PFAS NI version at present and won't for several months. Would MPCA grant some type of grace period?
I could start off with this one. So the law itself does not note that food packaging in its definition includes requiring and having the contact food. It talks about a unit package, an intermediate package, and a shipping container, and then talks about the various types of components. So all of them are included in the law, being prohibited to have PFAS in there. So that's the first part of the question. The second is in terms of grace periods and the like. As mentioned earlier, the agency in the law was not given any ability to provide any exemptions, and that through the law. And so the implementation is starting on January 1st under the law.
Okay, thank you, Kirk. Next question. Reference was made multiple times to taking action if PFAS is known to be present. If a member of the food industry has attempted to obtain information from upstream suppliers and has received no response from those upstream suppliers, what is MPCA's guidance on those products that have already been purchased by a distributor or sold into retail prior to January 1st, 2024?
We have heard this dilemma, and there is no good, easy answer or guidance. It's what tools are available to the company that has to take the action, and some companies we have heard of are in fact reverse distributing and bringing product back through the supply chain and out of sale, at least until such time as they are able to get full information on the content, whether any of the food packaging contains intentionally added PFAS. So again, not a lot to offer there, not a lot of great choices. So bringing it back is one way at it, or you risk being out of compliance if you're in that period of uncertainty. So I don't know if any others can add anything.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll move on. Next question. What will the general public see about this January 1st deadline?
Well, our website is pointed out earlier isn't a platform for us to be able to share information on this in terms of what are various PFAS prohibitions, whether it's these, firefighting foam, or Mars law. So it's the best right now source of a landing spot for folks to have information. We encourage folks to share that information. We also do have a Gov delivery list for folks to sign up for updates, whether it's general public or businesses or local units of government. Encourage folks to do that on that main website also to be able to collect more information at this time.
Great. Thanks, Kirk. Next question. Are there any educational materials available from the MPCA that local governments can provide to businesses in the area to spread awareness?
At this time, our website is the best. We encourage folks to sign up to the Gov delivery page and to get updated information. If folks, local units of government want to use information from our website, please do. If there are other things that we can help with, let us know, as we have sent out other messages at various times that we can share those with folks if people are doing their own notification.
And I do believe we intend to post this recorded webinar to YouTube, so that would be another source of information, hopefully helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I, from the communications perspective too, just want to encourage folks, if there is something specific you're really thinking about or maybe want more information on, please do reach out to that PFAS info email. We monitor it closely. So great. Okay, next question. The EPA is working method 1633 on method to analyze PFAS in solids, aqueous substances, tissue, and biosolids. It is currently still in draft. Oh, sorry, that's not a question, just a comment. Next question, does this apply to packaging for nutraceuticals, vitamins, marijuana, and tobacco?
Well, we believe that the, again, anything consumed orally, except for medicines, are pretty much in play as far as we know. That is our understanding. So that would include, as it does in some other states with similar laws, vitamins and dietary supplements and the like. I'm not too familiar with nutraceuticals, and we haven't really started thinking about marijuana. So, you know, we'll take these issues away and try to post, you know, more complete responses once we have them on the webpage on an FAQ site. So.
Great. Okay, thank you, Al. Next question. Is there a fining mechanism associated with the MPCA's enforcement related to this ban? Or is the enforcement objective primarily educational?
I can take that one. Yes, we do have the ability under state statute to enforce and issue penalties as we deem necessary and consistently across the state. So the first part of that is a yes. We do have that mechanism. The enforcement objective here is, again, as I said before, consistency across the state. And obviously there is an educational component through fact sheets and everything else, but it is merely that industry is following the rules across the state.
Great. Thank you, Kit. Great. And then it looks like we are getting some comments as well in the chat. Stephen, thank you for that feedback there.
And I'll touch base on Stephen's piece here. You know, Minnesota has a history of various types of packaging law, whether it's heavy metals or metals for it, and other types of prohibitions on chemicals and toxics in items, whether it's BPA, flame retardants, lead, mercury, and we have been able to implement that throughout the years here in Minnesota. And it has been something that manufacturers, distributors, and stores have been implementing. So this is similar, again, a new chemical, and it is, you know, PFAS is newer to folks and understanding where it is, and it will take a little time to work through it. But in the past, and we believe in the future, it will not bring an end to the food distribution system here in Minnesota. We, as Kit mentioned, have been able to enforce it in Minnesota, and even others such as lead and cadmium. We've worked with national retailers and distributors such as Amazon and others to remove products that have mercury or lead in their items. And we'll continue to work with those manufacturers and distributors and retailers to implement the state law. So I do appreciate and understand that new laws, when they're first implemented, have some growing pains. As mentioned, we know some companies are having some difficulty getting information from their suppliers and that information, but do overall believe that this is a law that folks will be able to comply with. And we know folks are doing it already, and thank everyone for your work on it.
Thank you, Kirk. Looks like we got another question in the chat. What sort of penalties could result from non-compliance? How will you determine if the PFAS levels discovered through testing are intentionally added versus just contamination?
I can try to touch on that one. You know, this being a new law and trying to figure out where we're at, there's like Kurt said, there's going to be growing pains to this one, but historically, you know, we can go from a letter of warning, which does not carry a penalty, all the way up through a stipulation agreement, which there is really no limit on how high that penalty could be. So, you know, it is going to be based off of the merits of the case, depending on how much the risk to human health and the environment. You know, we talk about economic benefit and willfulness and culpability and all those things when we're trying to justify a penalty.
Great. Thank you, Kit.
Could I add that, yeah, I think the lack of a bright line threshold concentration above which is a violation, the lack of that in the law and the intentionality included as well will make it interesting to work through trying to get information with the companies involved and just sort through that. You know, if we're able to get more leverage to work up a supply chain to get more information that might get to intentional addition, then that would be helpful to all, I think. But yeah, it will be an interesting new approach to try to work with.
Great. Thanks, Al. We got another question. In conjunction with the response related to, quote, consistency across the state, what steps were taken to advise members of the food and beverage industries between the passage of this law during a special session and the current time, which is approximately 30 days before this goes into effect?
Thanks. I'll take that one, Hannah. You know, I think more education is always wanted and more communication and can be done. This was, when passed 2 years ago, 2+ years ago, a very high profile piece. Minnesota was one of the first states to implement this. There was a lot of news coverage at that time. I do know that the various associations shared that with various publications they had. Understanding though, not everyone is part of association and we will continue to do our best to also share the information. So do know that it was a highly debated item when first enacted, and we'll continue to help try to do it. Understanding again, getting a hold of every single person is difficult. We'll keep making our efforts to do so. This and the other education pieces we have on our website are some of those things we'll continue to take steps to.
Great, thank you, Kirk. Does anyone else have a question for these the PCA staff here? It does look like we're caught up on questions, so. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, no. All right, we got one more in. May a food beverage producer utilize existing packaging inventory that may have intentionally included PFAS for container manufacturer performance for distribution outside Minnesota in states that do not currently regulate PFAS as such?
I will try that one. We've heard a question like this. If the action of distribution or, any of those actions that I mentioned on the slide, which are prohibited to take if intentionally added PFAS is present in a food package, if those occur in Minnesota, they could be in violation of the law, even if the product is sent outside the state, sold outside the state. That is the interpretation that we have received, and that's our understanding at this point.
Thanks, Al. So we'll just give it another minute here if anyone has any last questions that they're typing up. And otherwise, we will wrap this up. And again, please feel free, if you have follow-up questions, just send them through to that PFAS info email listed below. Great. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We will be using that Gov delivery to follow up periodically as we have updates. So make sure you do sign up for that. You can do so on our website. And then it looks like Beth did ask here, when and will all questions such as these be addressed and documented? Al, is that a question for you?
I think we will take the questions in and address them, discuss them and address them. And then once they're processed like that, would expect to post the answers on the webpage or some other one that's linked from that webpage. So we will address the questions as we're able to fully process them and then publish them. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Al. Yep. And again, it was shared earlier in the presentation, but our website did just get updated with some more info on this, and we will continue to provide information there as it becomes available. So with that, I think we will conclude today's call, but thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate your engagement here. And again, just follow up if anything else comes to mind. Thanks all.